saying that more than ever now is the time to take a contrarian approach to doing anything abroad. That includes going offshore for financial reasons, business reasons. It's really important because the crowd psychology affects everything that you do abroad, and we've kind of piecemeal, little by little, kind of given it to you in videos, little by little. So it's something that needs to be paid attention to. You really need to pay attention to this. It affects your life and everything that you want to do. Today we're talking about 3 good reasons not to move to Portugal right now. So the first good reason is that this is 2019 and it has been named the best place to retire in the world. Why not go there based on that? Well, if you're new to the channel, then you might not know that we have lived through the best place to retire bubble in Cuenca, Ecuador, and so we are very well aware of what goes on in these bubbles and all of the vested interest in the bloggers and the magazines that jump on the bandwagon to convince people that this is the best decision in the world. You know, it's like you pick this spot on the map and you call it the best place to retire, and all of a sudden it's got all this inflow, and in and of itself it becomes the exact reason why you wouldn't want to move there. Okay.
We're going to talk about the 5 big foreigner bubble cities for 2020. Where are those going to be?
Well, and big refers to the size of the bubble. So these bubbles, they definitely have a method to them where they are in a vicious cycle scenario. Obviously these cities are in totally separate, different countries, and cultures are very much different from one another, so they aren't going to cookie cutter appear exactly the same, especially in areas that already had some crime, and by the time the bubble gets to its vicious part of the cycle, they're going to get real bad, like in Santo Domingo and in Mexico and other places in Latin America, whereas maybe in Portugal or places in Europe, they won't get that bad, but they'll still spike and they'll still be notable. One thing about crime, though, is that it's generally, the news of crime is suppressed. We have ways of ferreting out and accessing that. So here are the cities. Lisbon, Portugal is, it's in that part where the prices are still in the frothy mode. It hasn't yet reached the...
So they're going to go even higher, the prices.
The prices are going to keep going higher. Now, it doesn't mean that the really high prices will keep going higher. It means that the prices will go higher in areas that haven't gone higher yet.
Yeah, because expats start branching out.
They start branching out because they
can't afford it.
They're told, though, you can live cheap, and it turns out that you can't. But if you go out here, then it's easier. So the prices are still in that spot, although they're pretty high right now in the big cities and in the Algarve compared to what they were before, because remember, that's a relative term. High, low is all relative depending on where you're coming from. But we always reference it back to what the local prices were before. All right, so that's where Lisbon's at. The next city... These places, they get really faddish, For example, Portugal was there before Ecuador. So why are people going to Portugal now when Ecuador was being promoted, 10 years ago?
And they're following the retire abroad
Exactly,
media.
that's my point. This retire abroad media promotion, people like to ask, am I too late? Is this bubbling? Is it too late? Here's how to tell if a place is bubbling. I know some people have said, well, I just count the number of vloggers. And Angie, as you said, the number of vloggers talking about how cheap Portugal is, which that's just a relative term. You know, to a guy that spends $10,000 a month, 4,000 is cheap. To a guy that lives on 3,000, 4,000 is too much. That's just relative, but people, they eat these things up on YouTube. And part of that is, gee, look how cheap Portugal is, even when it has already doubled and tripled from what it was before. But the bottom line is that the amount of bloggers have like gone up at least 300% just from a cursory overview. It might be even more than that. So the speed at which things are going up is increasing, and that's a sign of a bubble. Is it too late? The tip I'm going to give you is, if you go there and you see people do this, they say, well, I have a retirement check, $1,500, whatever, and I can still go to Portugal, or together we have $2,000, $2,500, whatever. We can still go to Portugal and here's the tip, and get a studio. If you have to pay $400 or $500 for a studio, or even a small one-bedroom, then that's telling you something. Okay, so this issue is not about, it's not just money. The RAM pumping affects everyone in different ways. So certain people are affected monetarily, but I recently, within my circle, saw a guy that said online on the internet, hey, listen to this, that he was working hard to save up $2 million so that he could live off the 4% rule, safe withdrawal return, meaning he would be withdrawing 4% of $2 million every year to live on. And you'd think he was talking about living in Florida or something. No, he was talking about living on that in Colombia.
I would think he's talking about in Dubai or something.
Yeah, he's talking about living in Colombia. I'm sure they're nice people. If that's you and you're watching this video, listen, man, I appreciate you. I appreciate what you're doing. But listen, these bubbles affect everyone in different ways, and somebody in those shoes is going to be affected differently. They may be oblivious to the pricing bubble. Yeah, the way that the different participants that follow these bubbles get affected, like people, like the guy that said he thinks he has to have $2 million to, you know, collect $80,000 a year in interest or withdrawals to live in Colombia, and he knows full well that this isn't a subsistence life. I mean, he's looking to quote unquote live rich in Colombia. But if you try to tell somebody like that you can live rich in Colombia on less than half that, they won't believe it. I mean, if that's what they think they need to have, if they really want to be in Colombia that bad, and they want to be the guy that is paying more than everybody else. But I'm just saying that there's people like that out there that have no clue about what they're contemplating and doing. And so our interest in this is to expose and make light of these facts so that at least some people will see, you know, the truth in what's happening as it's going to affect them, because it will affect people, and it will affect them in different ways. As these things progress, certain people are displaced, and that's financial. But other people, like this fellow that thinks he wants to live rich on $80K a year in Colombia, it will affect people like that in also, but in different ways, such as the crime. They subject themselves to the crime because Colombia is still Colombia, and just because you go there and you want to live rich on $80,000 a year, it doesn't mean that all of a sudden it's a place where it makes sense for a rich guy to go around, you know, spending money like a drunken sailor, you know, in the middle of a bunch of poor folks. I mean, it has never made any sense to me. So we made an earlier video, which country would you most likely be a victim of crime? And in that video we outlined the complete picture, the vicious cycle of the foreigner when they follow these Retire Abroad magazine crowds. They have no clue how big these crowds are and how orchestrated and manipulated they are in order to fulfill the agenda of creating this bubble. All right, so Portugal is not the only bubble in the making at this time. There are other bubbles in the making.
Well, Ecuador was a bubble for a long time.
Yeah, Ecuador was a bubble that popped, and now you're trying to do this to it. It's like bubble. It was down here, it was bubble, and then it popped, and then
They're trying. It's
trying to get it back up. The foreigner becomes the gold mine. It's just inevitable. And so while this is forming, the participants at each stage don't have a clue what's happening. When the promotion progresses from the backpacker or the small Social Security check level up to the $2,000 to $3,000 level a month that's being pitched to the business person or maybe the wealthier person in the Forbes magazine, each individual doesn't have any clue that they're being used as a pawn in this bubble making strategy by the RAM groups. They don't know what's happening. They don't understand. All they hear is, well, I'm spending $8,000 a month to live in Vegas, and I could go to, name your pick, put your choice of the place, and only spend $2,000 or $3,000. That's all they hear. They don't know that the places started out, you could live on $700, and then it went to $1,000, then $1,500, now it's $2,000, $3,000. They don't know where they're at in this. And so because each stage, each participant or person that is getting into this doesn't really know they're entering a stage of a bubble and doesn't really understand what stage you're in and what's coming next, they're completely blind. And the other reason why they're completely blind is because of the suffocation of this information from the vested interest. And so I think more than ever, now more than ever, it's really important to take a contrarian approach to your live abroad, because you have people like this. There are unwitting participants in these RAM-induced bubbles that it's just crowd psychology is what it is. People get really dogmatic at following the crowd. So, and that's what we've done, you know. we've taken a contrarian approach, and even though 8 years ago we started out in a Ram city, even so we took a contrarian approach within that city, and this gave us a foundation to build on because it gave us an opportunity to learn Spanish, kind of get a feel for, you know, where we could place our skills, that we were professional industrious frugalists in the States for a couple of decades, and it gave us an opportunity to get a feel for how to use those skills abroad and how to enhance those skills and match them to our challenges abroad.
But some people think that when you live like the locals, that you're going to be living in poverty or something. It's just really strange.
I like to call it living on a local pricing level instead of living like the locals, because living at a local pricing structure avoids all of the negatives that we expose about these, you know, Ram-induced bubble areas and this circuit.
Exactly.
You know, we're saying that more than ever now is the time to take a contrarian approach to doing anything abroad. That includes going offshore for financial reasons, business reasons. It's really important because the crowd psychology affects everything that you do abroad, and we've kind of piecemeal, little by little, kind of given it to you in videos, little by little. So it's something that needs to be paid attention to. You really need to pay attention to this. It affects your life and everything that you want to do. And so I'm just saying, you know, there's a lot of misinformation out there. The areas everybody wants to be in become too expensive, and then people start getting pushed out. But the difference here is that you're not pushing out your own paisanos, so to speak. You're not pushing out other Americans like in America. You're pushing out locals, and you're the foreigner. You came from far away.
That's what makes it bad.
Okay? And you came into somebody else's country, and you're displacing them. And they were there before you, and it's not just that they were there before you, it's that you're not from there. Because the way people look at things is territorial. It's like, well, I was born here. You know, people are very much into the where you were born thing, you know. But when you're contemplating going abroad, that's exactly what you're doing. You're going into a foreign land and you're affecting the foreign locals.